agree here, we got to pay attention to what is doable, what the private sector will provide. Second, I think would be the sense of the board, and you guys can all tell me that as you meet with the RFP folks, to say that we care about consideration for lodging now in appropriate structures. We don't have to say you're required to do it. We don't have to say we're putting it off until the end. We can say we'd like you to think about it. And personally, I'd say that's what the board would like you to do. Not having talked to the board about it.
Mr. Joseph.
Lodging comes in many forms. We've talked to marine operators. There's a common model now where people don't want to necessarily sleep on their boat, and you have marinas that have literally 5 or 10 units, and a very baby step towards lodging on them, as opposed to what Esther may be looking for, which is a 150 unit lodge, National Park Service historic lodge. So there's ways to. And I was actually sitting here on my phone. I wasn't being rude in the meeting. I was actually trying to figure out if there are any Airbnbs being offered on Fort Monroe right now under our noses. So there's lots of ways that lodging will creep on here with or without our support. So I expect there will be, but it's usually a following use, whether it's a leading use or following use. And once the visitorship builds at the park, once the visitor center is open and has a record of numbers that we can take people through the door at the visitor center, you'll get more support for a major facility as opposed to a baby step. That's
The point. Developers need metrics. They need to know there's going to be a certain number of people that will be using it before they commit a substantial sums of money. John Rose?
Lodging in terms of a lodge or an inn and so on, you know, people are starting to say, well, it's working at the Presidio. Yeah, it's working at the Presidio, but the trust invested a huge amount of money to make the buildings available for lodging use. And by available, I mean configured inside before the developer was asked, before it was sent out for developers to respond. So the idea that you can just take a building like it is, particularly if it doesn't meet all the local requirements, and turn it into lodging because it's such a successful thing, needs to be thought through, and whether or not there's going to have to be some investment to make it happen before a lodging person comes along. And yes, the two lodges on the Presidio are hugely successful. Over 92% occupancy rate year-round. People want to stay in places like this. There's no doubt about that. But we got to think the financing through and the discussions with developers through in a very serious way. It's not necessarily easy to do.
So we've got that enormous, a couple of really substantial sized buildings overseeing the parade ground there. They're historic, granted. They're enormous. They're an extraordinary expense to maintain. Would that be prohibitive, a prohibitive investment to turn them into lodging in an historic building?
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Well, I think the answer to that is one of the huge successes at Fort Monroe was the way the RFQ was distributed across the country, if not internationally, and there were no lodging proposals that they were discussed. There were no lodging proposals like we are discussing today for the Inner Fort, and so that would tell me that when the private investment community looked into it, for whatever reason, they did not. I think there are other buildings on the property. I mean, like John said, our master plan specifically identifies the site. If we wanted to do something sooner than that, then I think that we could. There are other buildings that we could look at. But the Inner Fort is about, if you put all those buildings together, I want to say it's about 220,000 square feet, and that becomes it's so large. It's a challenge.
Yeah. Yes, sir. And then,
So, I mean, obviously, lodging, like any other uses, can come in phases and over time. And as Jay said, it's not likely that we're going to lease all of this 400,000 square feet or whatever it is next year. But one building stands out to me as logical and moderate in size, and that's the Provost Marshal's building at the head of Ingalls Road as a lodging unit. And its proximity to the marina. I know more than a year ago, you had a visit that I arranged with History Tours of America that runs boat tours in major cities, harbors, and Park Service places, including Fort Jefferson. And their business model is day trips, largely, with people staying nearby. That's one possible partner, or there are many others like that, that you would associate a lodging unit with the marina, conducting tours on boats to Fort Wool, into the Hampton Roads Harbor, maybe someday up the James River to Jamestown, or up the York River to Huehuecomico, and really make that an experience that continues to add to the luster of Fort Monroe.
that's the, just to clarify, that's the building across from the Hotel Chamberlain?
No, it's up toward the main entrance where the two roads converge.
Okay, that's
at
the other,
light.
when you say the entrance to Ingalls,
Yeah,
it's
it's
the other.
at the far
Gotcha.
end.
Okay.
That's just.
Yeah, and I would say that building jumps out, is, for me, if you had asked, like, is there any building, I would have said that would be the building. It's just an absolutely perfect location in terms of its proximity between walking distance to Phoebus, walking distance to anywhere at the fort, walking distance to the marina. It's an ideal, perfect location. It would be a great gateway property you can see developed like that at the entrance to Fort Monroe. Water views out of every window, so it's just perfect. I think that's the type of thing that when we get into our conceptual design discussions with the developers, depending on what people are proposing, that's where I see us putting our foot on the scale and pushing it in that direction. And if it doesn't go in that direction, I see that as being where we have the courage, based upon the discussion that we're having today with the board, to say to a developer,